In the unlikely event that there is anyone who has yet to find a compelling reason to support this extraordinary charity, allow me to introduce someone who will undoubtedly help to persuade you. This summer, Giles Johnson set off on a journey of a lifetime. What Giles called an awfully big row, in his words, was in fact a 1,700-mile journey across the Atlantic Ocean in aid of Headway. Together, with his friend Matthew, they set off from Canada on June the 22nd in their rowing boat named Hurricane. From there, the duo rowed for 36 and a half days to Dingle in County Derry on the west coast of Ireland, battling stormy seas and spotting giant icebergs, awe-inspiring sunsets with plenty of sea life to keep them company. Giles is undoubtedly guilty of rowing the extra mile for Headway, and I'm delighted that he has joined us to tell us more. So please join me in welcoming Giles to the stage. Can you hear me okay back there? Yep. Giles, in a few words, what on earth inspired you to row the Atlantic?
I think when one does this sort of thing, there are multiple reasons for doing it. One was to find out whether we could, whether we were, I think in the vernacular, hard enough, but also to do something really worthwhile, to do something that made a difference, not just to me, but to other people as well.
I think I'm right in saying that fewer people have rowed the Atlantic than have climbed Everest. What on earth, how did you actually come to the idea that you were going to do this? So what did the conversation take? How did it come about?
Well, Matthew and I had done various events before together, swims and mountain marathons and swim runs and things like that. As ever with he and I, we went out for lunch together. And it happens at lunch, you drink a bit of wine, and then you make decisions that you might regret later. We also had done an abortive earlier row during lockdown when we tried to row from North Devon up to Lancashire, and we made it as far as Aberystwyth. So there was a bit of unfinished business in there as well.
So your training didn't go to plan, but you bravely embarked on it. So I mean, what is it literally like? You get in a boat, where you got in the boat at St. John's in...
Yeah, we got on the boat at St. John's in Canada, and St. John's is an extraordinary place. It's like the west of Scotland on steroids. It's absolutely enormous. There are icebergs, and there are trawlers the size of ships, literally, called Executioner, Dominator, and all of these in the harbour, and our tiny little boat, Hurricane.
And how big is that boat?
Hurricane's 25 feet long.
Right.
And effectively, if you think about two rowing machines, end to end, and then a little cabin on either end, that's what Hurricane looks like. The water there is 8 degrees. Nobody goes in it.
It's funny that.
It's odd.
Apart from...
Well, whales, icebergs, all the bird life you could ever imagine. And as you said earlier, extraordinary skies, extraordinary sunsets.
And presumably these icebergs, I mean, they would just trash you.
Well, they would, yeah. And before we set off, there's an iceberg map, so you can actually plot them on your charts. You know where they are. They cause a real hazard for the oil rigs, and they are moved out of the way by large ocean-going tugs, which also got quite close to us as well, which is interesting.
No doubt you got lots of support whilst you were away at sea on the crossing, but I understand James Cracknell sent you a message.
Yeah, James very kindly sent us a message, which I think he said, if I were you, I'd have gone the other way. Which was sort of, and then he said, but you're there now, you might as well get on with it.
If I were you, I just wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, yes.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to explain a little bit more about what he meant by that. We're going to welcome Olympic rower, but also transatlantic rower, Mr. James Cracknell, to the stage. Welcome, James. James, please take a seat. I mean, as one of the few people who have done this transatlantic crossing, could you just give a little bit of a flavour of your recollections of the time you spent crossing the Atlantic?
I was talking to Giles about it over lunch, and it's like, well, so what's the good bit about it? And then I had to think for quite a long time what the good bit about it. And weirdly, the best, I guess the point that one of the highs was thinking we can get there, because once you've lost sight of land and you've got the sort of the GPS and your map, and you think 3 miles an hour, 3,000 miles, we haven't got enough food, and I'm not, and then breaking something down that size into chunks that you can get your head around, but are big enough to take something off the overall distance was pretty hard. And then what I hadn't really thought about or probably prepared for was how much time, because Giles was saying you rode 2 hours on, 2 hours off is a kind of good way to keep the boat moving, but that means you're on your own for a lot, and then you're in your head for a lot of the time, and actually there's all manner of things that go through your head that you hadn't really thought about, because you're not away from a mobile or email or friends or anyone else for that length of time, and so getting your head into that space I found really hard, and I wasn't. And when I did it with a guy called Ben Fogel, and we were in a race, so when you're moving, everyone else is moving. If you're stopping, other people could be moving, and so I think the race is the way I kind of motivated myself to get across it. Ben's not the most competitive guy in the world, and so you have two different motivations, which then when you're in a dark space and trying to motivate the other person, it was quite tricky. And so it was good, to motivate someone who doesn't think the same way as you. I don't know if you had arguments with with crewmates that you wouldn't have had before, but there's one. Ben, he's very confident in what he thinks he knows. So it was, and he's just slightly worried he's got a big nose, which is in generalised quite, I imagine, can get on top of you. But when you're in the middle, on your own with just me in the middle of the ocean, it's probably not such a big deal. But he didn't want to wear a hat because it doesn't look good in hats. Yeah. And I was like, mate, you're going to get, we're near the equator, we went the easy way, you're near the equator. And so you're going to get heat stroke, just put a hat on. And he goes, no, heat stroke's genetic. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure it is. Anyway, so in the middle of the night, I could hear someone throwing up, and he was leaning over, throwing it up, and he goes, I go, you got that heat stroke? He goes, no, I think I ate a bit of dodgy food. And I was like, mate, it's rehydrated food. There's nothing there.
Giles, I mean, that mental side of it, and you've got a forces background, I imagine you've been through some tough experiences there, but how important is, as James said, the teamwork the bond that you forged? Did you face those kind of tensions as well, and what was the mental challenge?
Matthew and I, we've known each other a long time, and that always helps, but we had 11 a.m. ship time every day. We had a truth and reconciliation. Right. And the rules were that if it was bothering you, you said. Amazing. And if you were being criticised, you had to take it. Because one of the rules that we had before we set off is that we were not going to fall out over this. We deemed our friendship too precious.
What if someone had annoyed you at like 11:30? Well, you had to wait 24 hours.
You had to wait 24 hours, exactly that. But you can sort of manage that.
Well, you could tell what I'm like to row a boat with. I suddenly, there's a flaw to your system.
Yeah, and we also had a very rigid regime on the boat that we started on day one, and we followed all the way through. And that gives you routine. It gives you something to hang on to. Because when you're out there, you've got no control over anything. You've got barely any control of the oars. So anything that gives you some structure is good for your head.
I mean, was that routine, that structure important for you, or was that, in retrospect, something that you guys might do differently? I don't know.
No, I think the structure was good. I think the lack of flexibility in it was, we reacted differently. So you do get, you start to read the weather a bit, and then you do get you can get some weather updates, and so when a storm's coming in, I would say, look, let's just row together for 6 or 8 hours, because we're going to have to stop probably for a couple of days in the storm. So we may as well make hay while the sun shines. But Ben was like, no, I want to stick to the routine. And so it's like, okay, you're going to rest for 2 days, you'll be bored. But
you guys were really early on. I mean, it was not a challenge that many people knew about. I mean, were we talking about 14 years ago? Was it that?
It was 2005 2005, 6. We went till
It's
Christmas
almost 20
2005,
years.
6. Yeah.
And I read your book, The Crossing, and that informed a book that I worked on called The Road to Recovery, which was a bunch of wounded soldiers who rode across in 2010-11. I guess there must have been lots of literature that you could fall back on, or lessons learned, or did you just do it your own way?
Well, I'm afraid to say that we just did it our own way. We had a very good mentor in a chap called Charlie Pitcher from Rannoch Adventure, who make the boats. And he sort of guided us through our preparation and all our training. And then we just went about it our way. We didn't want to do a race, hence the route we did. The northern route that we took, I think the 88 crews have tried it, 38 have failed.
Wow.
And of those, 4 crews have been lost. So it's a significant route.
And James, you've obviously put yourself through some extremes, doing physical challenges through initially as your rowing career as a multi-Olympic champion. Where does it sort of rate in the scheme of extreme things that you've done?
Well, I think, I guess, you have to, Giles said, you have to own your preparation for it. And I approached it, we did a race, you approach it with a sort of a racing attitude. And the reality is that, okay, the lakes may have changed that we raced on, but our distance was 2,000 metres, and the world of sport's very sterile, whereas, look at the picture out there, that you're a small dot on a massive landscape, and the reality is it becomes about problem solving far more than racing. And in terms of my recovery from an accident, actually, I rode in 2005, had an accident in 2010, but for the 5 years after the row and before the accident as well, that what it has given me, and I really did draw on in periods of my recovery, is it's very easy for things to get on top of you out there. And it wasn't until halfway across that I said, I was telling myself, look, stop moaning, look around, you're rowing across the Atlantic, when are you ever going to do it again? Never is the answer.
That was going to be my next question.
When are you ever going to do it again? Just enjoy the moment, enjoy being out here. And then that translates to that the reality is, not every day is sunshine, but that the next day might be. And so there's always something good in a day, even if there's a lot of bad crap going on. But I think that sort of being forced to look that way, and you realise when you're out there that people have sacrificed for you to be there, they're missing you. I had one child at the time, and his dad's not there, so you better bloody enjoy it.
Great message in there for sure. I mean, so James, you've already answered my last question there, which was exactly that. Would you ever do it again?
Absolutely not.
Fair enough.
I want to be quite emphatic about that.
And your wife Lucy sat down there. There's going to be a round of applause as we speak.
We left. We were so determined. The boats aren't cheap by the time we bought them, and we were so determined we'd never do it. We left our boat in Antigua, and because we couldn't be bothered to ship it back. And then the next time I saw it was like 15 years later. It was at the Chelsea Flower Show, and someone had made it into a flower bed. So someone had shipped it back and then made it into a flower bed.
I imagine that was Ben's role, was it?
Yeah, I'm sure he's good at that as well.
Perfect. Well, guys, I mean, congratulations, both of you, but especially, obviously, more latterly, Giles. Absolutely fantastic effort. I know everyone at Headway is incredibly grateful, and I believe we've got a token of the gratitude from the charity. So congratulations and thank you to both of you, which James is going to present. So, Giles, congratulations.